Hey there, BrewTube, Easy Homebrewer, coming back with another video. This time I'm going to be talking about yeast starters for beers. You could also correlate this with meads as well, but this is primarily meant for beers. So stick around, I'll show you what you need and how do you make an awesome kick-ass starter. Stay tuned. Okay, as you see here, I'm making a 10-gallon porter for me and a buddy of mine. And as you can see right here, it says I'm required to have 2 packages. And so, basically, I'm going to need a 2.5-liter starter in order to produce almost 500 billion yeast cells when I need 430. I always like to get a little bit extra, so that way, you know, it's less stress that you have the yeast to deal with. So the things that you're going to need is obviously a recipe of what you're going to need. A stir plate. This one's DIY. You can either make a DIY one or you can go buy one. It's up to you. The yeast, obviously. When you're adding this info into Beersmith, as you can see, I got 2 manufactured dates. I'd always go with the older one, just because this is going to be the worst of the 2, so I might as well base everything off of this one. Anything extra to this one's nothing but a bonus. Erlenmeyer flask, because I need a 2.5 liter, which is right about there. I put about a little over 3 liters in here for boil off when it comes time. I have extra light plain DME. This is something that I use for my starters also. Coming in here. Dry malt needed. It even tells you exactly how much you're going to need. So, DME, boil pot, obviously. And then the last thing that I do specifically is this is yeast nutrient. I'll actually add half of everything that I need for the brew. Half of it goes right in the starter. So, let's say you have a 5-gallon batch. This is 1 teaspoon per gallon. So, for a 5-gallon batch, it's a total of 5 teaspoons. I'd wind up putting 2.5 teaspoons of this directly in that starter. The other 2.5 teaspoons go right at the 10-minute boil on brew day. So this is about 2 days before ahead. Just because this is a huge ass starter, I want to make sure it has plenty of time to flocculate and everything. So that's the quick rundown of everything that's needed. Now it's time to make a starter. Okay, so my pot right here. Basically, the first thing I'm going to do, this is already pre-measured by weight, about 8.5 ounces of DME. Fucking half a pound for a 10-gallon batch. So go and dump that right in my boil pot. And then my whole 3-liter Erlenmeyer flask worth of water. You can use RO water. I wouldn't use hose water, obviously. But I would go ahead and use some kind of filtered water to do this. Alright, so now I got the whole 3 liters in there. And so the next step I'm going to do is I already have obviously the DME in there in the water. Got the heat on high because I want to boil this thing. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2, or let's see, this is a double batch, so I'm going to add 5 teaspoons altogether to this batch. It's a 10-gallon batch. I've already put the other 5 teaspoons, everything else with my brew stuff, and so now it's just adding the other 5 teaspoons. So the other thing you want to make sure is when adding this, none of that DME will stick to the bottom, because it will, and it'll do it quick too. Plus you're going to get a lot of charge and stuff like that. Alright, so 5 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, doing a normal 5-gallon batch, I would put 2.5 teaspoons in this boil, and the other 2.5 teaspoons in at the 10-minute mark in all my brew day. So I'll wait till this thing gets to a boil and I'll get back to you. One of the other things that I forgot to mention earlier on, one of the other required items you need is a stir bar. This is a little 1-inch little bastard right there. Looks like a little pill, basically. I got that attached with the magnet, so that way I can pull it out and not have it actually go into my brew when it comes to pitching time. They have bigger ones. I think they have like a 2-inch one. Sometimes it's good to test it because sometimes that your motor might actually throw the bar if it's too big or too small. So basically the 1-inch one works really good for me. I've already done a test run about 3 liters earlier, and this thing will spin a 3 liter starter no problem. So while this is starting to heat up and coming up to a boil, basically the other thing I wanted to do is I don't worry about it prior to because the water's actually going to get boiled. But now that is getting boiled, I'm going to go and start disinfecting this one with a good old bucket of sanitizer. So basically I'll just leave everything in there as well as the yeast packets. I'll put the yeast packets in there. Treat it as if like you have this brew day where you put, everything that's going to come in contact with the beer, you want to make sure it's completely sanitized and clean, obviously. So stick around. So while this is coming up to a boil, one of the things I want to talk about when I see other videos and other online discussions talking about yeast or starters, the people like to put a bung and an airlock on it. I think that's completely the wrong thing to do. One of the 3 main components for yeast to produce is oxygen. When you boil a liquid, or especially water, all that oxygen is getting dissipated outside the liquid. That's the reason why prior to pitching, you use the O2 wand and add a whole bunch of O2 back into the starter. Into the wort. By not doing the same thing with the starter, you're already stressing your yeast out before it even has a chance to even make beer. So I'm a big opponent to you can use them foam stoppers that still breathe. That's basically the key here that I'm getting at. You have to allow the yeast starter to breathe because it needs that oxygen to produce. Okay, you're giving it food, you're giving it enough yeast, but if you're suffocating it, you're stressing the shit out of it. It's kind of like, first thing you do, wake up in the morning, you decide to see how long you can hold your breath underwater. It ain't going to be very damn long. So give your yeast starter a chance to produce and do what it's intended to do. Get that damn airlock off of it because it needs oxygen to produce. Yeah, it's nice to see the little bubbles, but that's the wrong time to see bubbles. Usually what I do is I'll go ahead and get a piece of aluminum foil over here, and that's all getting sanitized as we speak right now. And I loosely put that over the top because obviously you don't want any flies or other bad shit to get into the yeast starter because then that doesn't help either. But it's still loose enough to where you can allow oxygen to come in, help the yeast out, and help it reproduce quicker than what it needs to. And by using an airlock, you're suffocating your yeast. You ain't doing a fucking thing. So that's my little rant for this video. Is allow it to breathe. That's the best thing I can say with it. And you'll see it when it makes that little the little cyclone. It's just pulling in O2 in that sucker. So that's what it needs. All right. Okay, as you see, I got myself a boil. So now I set the timer. 12 minutes. Okay, a couple more seconds. Timer goes off. Heat goes off. Lid. Put on right on top. I let that sit for about a minute. Up until that point, I'm going to start a ice water bath here in my sink so I can cool down that starter relatively quick without any hassle. Stick around. Okay, now that my starter is cooled, I pull it out of the sink. Basically, I don't know the actual temp because I haven't opened this thing yet, but I do know it's cool because this is sat on my stove now for about 5-10 minutes. Feeling it, it's nice and cool to the touch. So you want to make sure that it's not hot before you add the yeast. Obviously, the yeast are temperamental. They have its own pH or its own range. So making sure that your starter is within that range too will help your yeast. You basically don't want to kill off your yeast as soon as you put it in there. So simple enough. Nice and sanitized flask, sanitized funnel. Basically, simple as simple. Just kind of go in there and just start pouring. It's nice to even have this thing. I know you can't see it on the video, but it's definitely aerating it while this thing is splashing around, which is good. Once again, yeast need the oxygen in order to reproduce and create healthy cell walls. And by limiting that, you're going to stress out your yeast, get off flavors, and you'll wonder why your beer tastes like shit in the long run. So like last little stir. I wind up putting everything in here to, you know, all the nutrients, everything else. Everything 100% goes into the starter. Almost there. All right. So now this thing is done all the way, and I actually have a little bit more than 2.5 liters, about 2 3/4, which is fine. I'm fine with that. That means the starting gravity itself for the starter will probably be a little bit lower. I'm fine with it. As long as this thing is nice and flocculated and everything else, by the time it comes to pitching time, I'm fine with it. One of the other things I don't do is I don't put it in the fridge and let it settle and decant. I just put the whole fucking thing in. I don't mess with any of that kind of stuff. Can I? Yeah, I probably could. But it's something where I don't mess with it. Okay, so next step. Sorry, I should have had this done before time. Is my stir bar. Nice and sanitized. Throw that in there. And then basically put my sanitized aluminum foil loosely kind of over the top. Basically just enough so stuff doesn't get inside. So now I'm going to put this thing on my yeast starter or my starter plate and get that thing spinning when I add the yeast. Okay, if you wind up doing a DIY one, you notice this right here is a magnet. That's something that's highly important to put on when you're making one of these. Obviously, if you buy a store-bought one, cool, you have nothing to worry about. So I've had a couple times where my starter wound up blowing off. So I get used to, and the wife wasn't happy about that either. So I get used to just putting a paper towel down there. Now inside there's that, let's see if I could get this thing to show up. I can't get it to show up. But there's the stir bar in there. And the object is to slowly kind of get that stir bar on there so it locks in. You turn it on. It might have thrown it. But basically we're just going to get this thing started. Alright, there we go. Took a little finesse. Something that didn't happen when the last time I did this. I just did straight water. I was able to put this thing on full blast. Had no problems. Go full blast on that little one, it keeps throwing my bar. So maybe I just need to go ahead and invest in the bigger bar now too. But I got the small one to where it's doing what it's doing. And really hard to see, but you can see everything just kind of moving around up in there. So now it's just time to add the yeast. Okay, so I've already added the first one. I really like to use White Labs Pure Pitches for just about everything. 2 reasons. I've had excellent starters, beers, and everything associated with these Pure Pitches. So I really like them. Second is, well, basically because my local homebrew store, they don't sell white yeast, but they sell White Labs, so I wind up getting White Labs. If you've never used the Pure Pitches, basically what I wind up doing is after it's sanitized and everything, I'll just kind of get in there and just kind of move everything around, shake it all up, because the yeast will kind of settle out, and you want to make sure that there's that it's well disseminated, I guess. You know, shaking it up, save the jokes for later. And then basically, with sanitized scissors, kind of go in there, cut the top open. I do it 2 different ways. there's inside. There's another smaller pack. Okay, this is where it's all harvested and everything else. So this is the yeast pack. Supposedly this is made in its own chamber and never touched oxygen, etc., etc. Could just all just be some shtick. But like I said, I've had very, very good success with them, so I'm going to keep using it. So basically now it's open. The other thing I like to do is I like to open it up ahead of time instead of trying to worry about it and have it spill in everything. And so now basically, just add the yeast to this. Let every little ounce and drop of goodness of this go in there, because every little extra piece of yeast that's in there is going to help your beer in the long run. Take your loosely fit foil over the top, and there you go. And this will stay like this for about 2 days until I get ready to, until I need to pitch it. So this is actually the first time I've made this big of a starter. Most of the time I make 1.5 liter. This is almost double from what I'm used to doing. So if you guys have any questions, first off, you can do this with anything. The Smack Pack Y yeasts, the Imperial dry yeast. This is typically, you can do with any kind. Normally, you want a starter if you're really going to be making a beer with a starting gravity of over 1060. That's considered a high gravity beer. Then they highly recommend you doing a starter, or you wind up having to use 3-4 yeast packs to get the same results. I love the starters. Ever since I've been doing starters, I've had really, really good beers. Clean beers. That's the most important thing, because this is a living organism. You make sure that it's happy. It's going to make you happy by having great beer. So this is AZ Homebrewer. If you have any other questions, comments, ideas that you want me to, you want future videos on, go and comment in the comments below. And if not, I'll see you later. AZ Homebrewer checking out.